Good afternoon. We have today Ashley Minner. She's a visual artist and educator from Baltimore, Maryland. She holds a BFA in General Fine Art, an MA and an MFA in Community Art, which she earned at Maryland Institute College of Art. A member of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina, she has been active in the Baltimore Lumbee community for many years. She is the founder of the Native American After-School Art Program. She is also the liaison for the Title VII Indian Education Program in Baltimore City Public Schools. She serves as the Vice Chair of the Maryland Commission of Indian Affairs of the Governor's Office of Community Initiatives, representing the Baltimore District. Her involvement in her own community informs and inspires her studio practice. Ashley is a 2008 Open Society Institute Baltimore Community Fellow as well. She is currently a PhD in American Studies at the University of Maryland, College Park. Please welcome Ashley. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm just Ashley, and I am a member of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. Where should I stand?
Behind the mic so they can hear you.
Can somebody do that PowerPoint for me? I try to speak up too. Can y'all hear me? I'm soft-spoken.
A little bit.
A little bit more?
Yeah. That's fine.
How about that?
Yeah.
Is better?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a member of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. We're not indigenous to this area. My grandparents, like many of their generation, moved up to Baltimore and other cities, mostly ones with GM plants, to work in the early 1950s and 60s. And I was asked by Omar Jamia's husband, if I wanted to do this presentation for you all, and I got guidelines from Jamia. And it's a lot of information. I'm going to try to squeeze into a little bit of time. I just want to preface by saying I'm not a member of any of the tribes I'm going to speak about, so it's a very precarious thing to talk about somebody else's culture, to tell somebody else's story. I don't know most of these things naturally. In my own experience, I had to do my homework, so I hope I don't misrepresent anybody or anything. And I did want to speak on Native American people generally to start, and I think it's important to share this information with young people learning about Native cultures. At the time of contact with people from other continents in the world, we're talking about Europe and Africa, because the Europeans brought people who were stolen from Africa. They were some of our ancestors as well. Native peoples populated all of the Americas. I think I have the first slide. We'll do the arrow, probably. Yeah. All of the Americas was populated by Native peoples, and they're still here. So oftentimes when folks teach on Native people, or when our children go through public education, they get the idea that Native people aren't around anymore, that they were only a thing of the past. You only ever see old pictures, illustrations, and on, and that's just not the case. We're still here. A lot of us live in houses like anybody else, or there's a great variety of houses in the country too, but we're not all necessarily walking around in tribal regalia and riding horses. We don't all have long flowing black hair, or live in teepees, or eat buffalo, and on. So Native Americans made really substantial contributions to the way we live today. A lot of things that are taken for granted. They're very sophisticated people. The oldest human remains in the whole world are found here in the Americas in California, and they're about 13,000 years old, which actually predates the theory that Indians migrated across the Bering Strait into this land. So a lot of Indian people will tell you we've always been here. They had a calendar in Mesoamerica that was so precise, from 600 BC, this calendar, it's only 19 minutes off today. Many of the foods, medicines, and clothes we enjoy today were originally developed by Native peoples, talking about popcorn, chocolate, vanilla, peanuts, tomatoes, beans. They invented aspirin. They invented the syringe. Clothes that we still wear, clothing designs, moccasins, parkas, they all came from native peoples. And a lot of the names for geographical places in the Americas, like Susquehanna, Massachusetts, Milwaukee, Mississippi, Potomac, something local, Manhattan. And the tribe indigenous to where we are today is the Piscataway. And there are 2 tribes recognized in the state of Maryland, and they're both bands of Piscataway Indians from right here. So I also wanted to speak on that sometimes Native peoples are called Native Americans or American Indians or First Nations people up in Canada. The term Indian originated with Christopher Columbus because he was lost and he thought he was in India when he landed in the Americas, and the name stuck. And also wanted to speak to the fact that there's over 500 unique Indian peoples in just what is now the United States now. So when I say I'm Lumbee and I'm going to talk to you about the PhoChunk people, that's really me talking about an entire other nation of people that's not my own. We're all distinct and unique and autonomous. But for our purposes for the camp, we're going to focus on tribes from a region known as the Northeastern Woodlands. We can advance this slide. Thank you. And that's this part of the Americas right here. So we're talking about north of here, up into Canada, and then to the west also into Canada and some of the Midwest and into the Plains region slightly. So in this area that you're seeing now, there were 3 traditional language groups. There were Algonquin, Iroquoian, and Siouan. And Jania thought we could cover a large group from each of the language groups with the different groups of children. So for the 3 to 5-year-olds, we'll look at the Wampanoag, who spoke Eastern Algonquin. The 6 to 7-year-olds, we're going to look at the PhoChunk or Winnebago Indians, who spoke Siouan. And I say spoke, they speak still. The 8 to 9-year-olds, Chippewa and Ojibwe, also they call themselves often Chippewa in the United States and Ojibwe in Canada, and they speak a language called Anishinaabe or Central Algonquin. They call it Anishinaabe. And 10 to 12-year-olds, we're going to look at the Iroquois League or the Six Nations people, and they speak Iroquoian. So we'll start with the Wampanoag. So, next slide, please. Next again. And again. So this is the seal of the Wampanoag Federation. And the Wampanoags, Wampanoag means Easterners or people of the light because they're from Massachusetts, far east, where the light hits first when every day starts. And you can go to the next slide. This is where they are. See Boston, the New England area. Going. And we can try to say hello together in Wampanoag. It's Waniki-suck. Waniki-suck. And this is a traditional Wampanoag home. I'll say this first. They lived in wigwams. This is a wigwam, and oftentimes individual wigwams were built in a village with palisades around it. It had like a fort wall around it to protect the villagers. Keep going. This is a reenactment type deal for people interested. And this is an example of a village with a wall, with a palisade. And the thing that the Wampanoag Indians are famous for, they're the ones in the Thanksgiving story, which is by and large a myth, but we won't go into the carnage and all that, but we'll just say they're the ones that the Pilgrims encountered at Plymouth, the Wampanoag Indians. And the Pilgrims were starving, and finally when they made it through one winter, they did invite the sachem of the Wampanoag, that means the chief, to feast with them, and they might have had turkey, but also likely they had lobster and things like that that are native to the area. Cranberries. Cranberries are traditional Wampanoag food. They actually have Cranberry Day. That's one of their major cultural festivals, where all the families will go down into the cranberry bogs and harvest them, and then they have a feast and on and on. Can keep going. And there's some shots of a Cranberry Day. This is Squanto. He's a famous Wampanoag. His name, that's the name we know him by commonly, but his name was Squanto. And he was Patuxet, which is a neighboring band to the Wampanoag, and they kind of get lumped together now, but in tradition they are autonomous. And Squanto is, anybody ever learn about Squanto in school? What does Squanto do?
Last week, I remember that name.
Yeah? Anybody know? You know? So he gets credited with helping the Pilgrims learn how to raise corn and saving everybody, you know, like he was the nice Indian that
Helped them plant.
right. The truth is Squanto was enslaved at first, and he was sent to Spain, and monks bought him and educated him in their ways, and he came back and he ended up, well, his don't tell the kids this probably, but his whole village had been massacred, wiped out, and even still he helped people adapt and survive. So, keep going. This is Crispus Attucks, and he was half Wampanoag, and he was actually the first, and half African American, as you can see, you probably know. He was the first casualty of the Revolutionary War. He was killed in the Boston Massacre, and a lot of people don't know that he was half Wampanoag Indian. Next. And then this is Sonny Doves, another Wampanoag, an African American man who made the New York City Basketball Hall of Fame. Sonny Dove. So just some notable people. This is a shot of wampum. This is some of their artistry as well as their currency. So wampum was made from shells. You can see the dark part comes from the quahog shell. That's a traditional Wampanoag food, the quahog clam. And then the white beads come from the inside of a conch shell. And the dark beads were worth twice as much as the white. And they would make these wampum pieces to commemorate historical events or important events, to gift. And they'd also use it as currency to trade. And you'll find that wampum is common to a lot of the people we'll talk about. It made it all across the region. Keep going. And they're also known for their fine basketry. This is a Wampanoag bag that was woven. You get a detailed shot of the fine work. Next. This is a Wampanoag game, and it's called Hubbub. And they use a wooden bowl and a number of flat marked playing pieces. One side of these pieces was dark and the other side was light colored. And then the players bounced the playing pieces by bumping the bowl on the ground, and score was kept using sticks that were passed back and forth depending on who won each toss. And when they bounced the game pieces, the players would chant hub, hub, hubbub. So you can see they still play the game. This was a reenactment shot, but they're Wampanoag have it together. They still practice their culture, and they are multiracial people. And we'll get to that too. As many of us are. That's another point. Like most of the native people on the East Coast, supposedly we're not here anymore because there was the Indian Removal Act. Mm-hmm. But like my people, because we also have African ancestry and European ancestry, and we were landowning and English speaking early on, they didn't know what to do with us. I mean, they tried some things, but we maintained our homeland on the East Coast, and other peoples were able to do the same thing for different reasons. And now, because contact with other people happened on the East Coast first, you find that Indians of the East Coast are more mixed than our ones in California and the Southwest and on, and there's some tension there also. But we're proud of everything we are and everybody we come from. This is a traditional Wampanoag food.
What is that called?
It's called, and it's made from, huh?
I think we're gonna have a recipe for that.
Yeah, I stuck one in there. It's made from dried corn, local berries, and nuts. You don't have to put the nuts because I know it's an allergen. Sometimes they put maple syrup in it to sweeten it, and it's like porridge.
It just looks like a breakfast cereal or something.
Yeah, kind of want to try that. This is sobag, and that's stew, and they make this out of different things, like maybe venison or fish, even just whatever meat, and it's a traditional dish. And then this is a feast. So you got your stew and your turkey.
Turkey's done.
And then this is a photo of a Wampanoag wedding, and it was part of the Indivisible show at National
That was
Museum.
wonderful.
Did you see it?
Yes.
Anybody else catch it?
Penny, do you know Penny Gamble?
She's
She's Wampanoag and her husband Thunder. They were part of it. It was wonderful.
awesome. Yeah, I know Gabby, who curated it, is Piscataway from here too, and they also have different ancestries, and we're very proud. So Lumbies were a big part of this show too. So, and here you got some Wampanoag youth at Mohawk Day, and I made it a point to include pictures of kids with every group because I want the young people to see that, you know, just like them, they're up there doing their thing. They might have been at church youth group or camp or whatever. This is probably a camp picture. And they look different ways. It's not all what you see on the movies or on the posters or on TV. We look every kind of way. You never know who you're talking to. So, moving right along, what did we say we would do? And I have these detailed notes you guys, you folks can look at too as you're teaching if you want more information for each group. The 6 to 7-year-olds, we're going to talk about the PhoChunk or the Winnebago people. And this is their seal. And their name, PhoChunk, comes from the word Ho-Chungra, which means people of the parent speech or people of the big voice. And we can go to the next one. This is where they're from originally, Wisconsin. And we can say hello and PhoChunk together. It's ha-ho.
Ha-ho.
Ha-ho. Okay. Their traditional homes are these made out of birch bark. They're rectangular. This is a famous PhoChunk person, Angel Decora. She was an artist and an educator and an activist. In the time of the boarding school, she was sent to Carlisle, which was an effort of the U.S. government. They thought if you kill the Indian, you'd save the man. So they sent these Indian kids, took them from their families and sent them to a white boarding school in Pennsylvania called the Carlisle School, and made the young boys cut their hair and weren't allowed to speak your language and on. But somehow she survived and she persevered and she became an advocate for Native rights. Angel Decora. These are some famous PhoChunk people. This is Mitchell Red Cloud Jr. He's a Korean War Medal of Honor recipient. Per capita, more Natives serve in the armed forces than any other race. There's different theories as to why. Some people think that Native people have this warrior instinct, and others is that this is our homeland. No matter who's in control, who's occupying it, it needs to be defended. And I have another theory about usually we're living in a really poor place, and the military is a good way to escape that, which is what my grandfather did during World War II. And so many Lumbee did, trying to get off the farm. This is Joba Chamberlain. He's a Major League Baseball player. He used to play for the Yankees, in his Yankees uniform there, and now he plays for the Tigers. This is some PhoChunk beadwork. They're known for their quill work with porcupine quills, and beadwork and basketry, and also pottery.
What in the world are they making with I can't even say it. What are they making with porcupine quills?
What are they making?
Yeah, like weaving it or?
They sew it into leather and it makes designs. I might have a
Okay.
picture in here of it. If not, I'll look one up for you. It's really beautiful. It almost looks like it was woven with their porcupine quills and they're dyed different colors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in dual survivor mode on whatever channel that is, Discovery. We saw a real porcupine, so their quills are tremendously.
Yeah.
First of all, there's a whole lot of them. You know, so to get them off, I'm assuming they'd be dead at that time. But still, there's a tremendous amount of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what would you use them for?
Well, quill work's big money. Like a lot of people make a living just doing quill work, and it gets really intricate and really beautiful. But I don't know how to do that. I bead a little bit, but I don't know about porcupine.
Yeah, I'm sure it's got to be intricate.
Yeah. Oh, and that past one, this is a bandolier bag. If you can for that. Yeah. So these are still very sought after. I mean, it's like a big pocketbook. It's cute, right?
Is that beaded?
Beaded.
Oh, wow.
With little tiny seed beads. And figure this is probably from the 1800s, and it's still held up and still.
Wow. How long did that take? And it's still here.
Yep. And so talking about kids' toys, this was common to most of the people we're talking about. Mr. Man, on your way.
I know.
Okay. Okay, so corn husk doll,
Mhm.
you know, that other kids play with also. But, and this is like a PhoChunk feast. They ate, and they still eat pretty much the same diet because they're a little further west. They had some different meats. And everybody made use of the maple trees and the sap. This is a PhoChunk feast and some PhoChunk ladies. And this is some PhoChunk people in their traditional regalia, obviously dressed their best for this picture. You can see the lady's got her bandolier bag on. This is after the advent of cloth. So the cloth came from trading with Europeans. Before that, most of the clothing was deer skin, which I just picked up this little medicine bag for a friend who's in town. You can see the material their clothes were made out of traditionally. A lot of them. And very ornate beadwork. This wasn't everyday dress back then either, but certainly not now. This is a PhoChunk baby. She's probably getting ready for a powwow. This is recent. See the cloth applique dress. This is their unique style of moccasin. They're known for this with the flap in front, and it's applique design. It's ribbon work, and it's edged in beads. And then here's a PhoChunk daycare and an elder. They still have their language, and he's speaking to the babies. So it's so important. Okay, moving on to the Anishinaabe people, and there are so many of these guys. They're, as saying in Canada, they're Ojibwe. In North America, they're Chippewa, and that's their emblem. They're spread out. You see from this next shot, they're all over. Around the Great Lakes and some into the prairie. This will say hello in Anishinaabe. It's Anin is informal, so we'll say Anin because we're friends. Anin. And then more formally, if it was an elder, somebody you didn't know, somebody needed to use extra level of respect, it would be Bojo. Bojo. Okay. This is a traditional Anishinaabe house, so a wigwam. Yep. And this was used in the wooded areas. On the prairies, they lived in teepees. They did live in teepees, so that's how spread out they are. It's a famous Anishinaabe person. Anybody know who it is?
Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Not Joe Biden?
It's close. Buffy St. Marie. It's like same generation.
Oh.
Yeah, I might have guessed that too. She's First Nations. In Canada, they're First Nations. Here we're really, that's the thing I meant to say. Most Native Americans prefer to be called by their tribal name. So I'm Lumbee, but we also say Indian amongst ourselves. And I mean, if you don't intend to offend someone, it's not too likely that you'll offend someone by saying Native American, American Indian, whatever. Did you have a question?
Somebody else?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Could you say that again about with the names, like identifying as Native American or Indian. I get into conversations with that about that a lot. You know, and the term indigenous and how, you know, because that sort of it's still an English word, but it defines like naming yourself after like a colonizer name, you know, or like a misterm like Indian.
Right.
Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, just that most people prefer to be called by their tribal names, so I'd be Lumbee. But I think it's with a lot to do with intent, because at the end of the day, we're all speaking English. We're you know, living in a settler colonial society. It's not going away. Like, we have English names besides being called indigenous or Native American or American Indian. So, you know, I think if you acknowledge and if you have positive intent and openness to other people's preferences is fine. Yeah. This is Louise Erdrich, and she's a famous novelist. She did Bingo Palace, some really famous work. She actually just got a really prestigious award from the Library of Congress like today or yesterday, and so recently I don't remember what it's called, but we were all like, yay. So she's an Anishinaabe. And this is Mr. Dennis Banks, who comes through here on the regular anymore. He was a member of the American Indian movement and still around with us today doing really important work in Native communities. He's been a very vocal figure in the fight for Native equity. Now, these people are known for their floral patterns, and you can see they're constructed out of these little seed beads. This is just a detail shot. Keep going. It's another detail shot. You can see just the intricacy and how. So the quality beadwork's judged for how close, how little space there is between these rows, and the fluidity of the lines. So you don't want a whole bunch of bump in your lines. And so here, this is an older piece of beadwork. Yeah, and you see somebody just for scale purposes what they're working with. And those also came through trade. And you try to find like beads that were consistent. This is still true today in size, because you get a big one and a small one and just mess your row all up. True. Yes. Okay. And then this is a larger piece, you can see. And they started beading onto velvet a lot, black velvet, because it's just a sharp contrast. They're known for their wild rice. So this is an illustration of people out and knocking the rice. They call it knocking the rice. Knocking the rice. And then here's an actual photo of guys knocking rice. And here's a guy reenacting the process more recently. And there's the rice. Anybody ever had native wild rice? Yeah. It comes from the Anishinaabe people. And it's the process hadn't changed too much, so if you eat it, that's where it came from. And here you have your wild rice stew. Some traditional Anishinaabe wear. You can see the clothing's made out of the buckskin, the skin of a deer, or doe skin, and it's adorned with applique beads. And this is probably quill work right here. You're asking about their rows. You can't see too well, but they've been dyed blue and white, and they're sewn on in rows. You have moccasins. And that would have been a special occasion too, with the feathers. And then here you have the floral print done in the bandolier bags and the whole cloth outfit with the applique beadwork. So it's a very fine regalia. And we use the word regalia. Regalia means, when I was growing up in culture class, they teach you it means suit of honor. We don't ever say costume, because that's what you wear when you're dressing up as something that you're not. So it's a regalia. And here is an Anishinaabe man in a traditional, and I say traditional dance style outfit. He's got a bustle on his back. He's got a roach on his head. It's a rocatia. And what you find now is that so many of our cultures participate in pan-Indian cultures, like powwow culture, because frankly we have to borrow and share with each other because we lost a lot. And also because culture evolves, it's living. So you might see articles from other native peoples and other world peoples in his regalia. And this is a
What is the piece of clothing, if you will, on the front that almost looks like a vest? Right in the middle of his chest.
This here,
Yeah.
that's a breastplate.
A breastplate. Okay.
Yep, and it's made out of bone. And that bone would have been dyed black. And these are their style moccasins. You see the floral design again, and how it's different than the Winnebago, the PhoChunk moccasins. They don't have that flat here. These aren't your everyday shoes either. And then here you got some Anishinaabe kids chilling. Looks like maybe the basketball team or maybe a camp. So you see kids just like our kids. Now we're moving on to the last group. This is the Haudenosaunee people, Six Nation people, Iroquois people, and they're from upstate New York, Canada area. So north of us, use the Chesapeake Bay. They're like up here. Yeah,
And you can tell a lot by some of the names of places for sure.
definitely. And they've maintained their homeland to a large extent. Of course, you know, the story about Manhattan Island being traded for a box of trinkets, Six Nation people. Not that they were duped either, it's that we had different value systems and different understandings of personal property and relationship to the earth. Keep going. So this is what I knew. Because the Six Nation people adopted the Tuscarora people who were closely related to the Lumbee people, so we'll all say Sego. And I don't know why they said Shago, because it's Sego. Sego. Hey. Alright. And that's in Mohawk. And the Mohawks, of course, are famous for Mohawks. And this is a longhouse. This is their traditional shelter. This is a small one. Really instructive. Wait till you see this. And this is a man in traditional, a Mohawk man in traditional regalia dancing beside his house. And this is an illustration of one of the larger longhouses. So like whole families would live in these things. They'd have a central fire. So you live with your extended family, maybe your extended family. This is a reconstruction. So you have a vent in the top for smoke and light at other times of day. And they also live in palisaded villages. The palisade is this wall going around. It's another picture of that. And another picture of that. This is like a mini model, like a train garden scale model. This is Hiawatha. Hiawatha has another name, Ayanwatha. And what Hiawatha did, this might be a good story to share, was the Six Nation people, they're made up of 6 nations. Some people call it a confederacy. I think that's a political term, so we tend to say the League of Six Nations, but they are, let's see if I can remember them all. Mohawk, Seneca, Onondaga, Cayuga, Oneida, Tuscarora. And Hiawatha, what he was known for is being a peacemaker. He went between all the nations, and maybe you heard the story with the arrows. He took 6 arrows and put them together and showed how one arrow by itself can be broken easily. 6 arrows together, you can't really break it. It's much harder. So he was the one that convinced everybody that they needed to be a league, sometimes referred to as a confederacy. Although each nation within that league was autonomous, their governing system, actually many people think, and I really believe, that the United States governance system was based on what they did. They had councils and really complex form of democracy, and they operated on consensus, which is not exactly what the U.S. government does, but And there's his arrows. And here's the early colonists meeting with Iroquois people. Haudenosaunee people. Iroquois is also a political term in a way. It came from the French. Haudenosaunee is what they call themselves. And then, actually, they were Haudenosaunee people. It says this is 1776. An Onondaga Sachem chief gave John Hancock an Iroquois name at Independence Hall. So they were invited to Philly to participate in what was going on. And then this is actually a meeting of the Six Nations Confederacy Council in 1898. So you can see as early as 1898, everybody's decked out in their Sunday best suit and tie, trying their best to adapt and hold power in the changing environment. They have a big festival, and I forget what the name of the festival is, but in this festival, I think it's the Midwinter Festival, they have this False Face Society, and I'm ceremonial, so I'm not exactly sure what they do, but they're known for making these masks, and they're kind of scary, and sometimes they're funny, but they're called false faces, and they're from the False Face Society. Carved out of wood, horsehair.
Wow.
He looks like that artist from the 70s that would do the color blocking
Can't think of
from the
the
60s.
Black.
White. I don't know what I'm talking
And
about.
then you see the inside of the mask. This is Saint Kateri. She was the first canonized native saint. So she's like the patron saint of native peoples if you're Catholic. I don't know how that stuff works, but this is Kateri. I know who she is. Okay. Anybody know who this is?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I don't know his real name.
Jay Silverheels, and he was Mohawk. And yep. And this is Rosie CMAS. She's Seneca, and she has a residency right now at Dance Place in Washington, D.C.
Oh,
We're in Washington, aren't we?
Yes.
Dance Place. And I just took my kids that I work with to go see her.
What's her name?
Rosie CMAS, SIMAS, and she's got a show coming up. We'll be there. She did a little free workshop with them. It was transformative. If y'all have an opportunity to bring the kids to work with her, she does what you call somatic dance, where she moves based on how she feels inside. And my kids, of course, they're inner city Baltimore kids. Like she's on something, Miss Ash. By the end, like they had me in tears. She was happy here.
When's the dance? She's having a dance soon, I guess.
An event.
An event?
Yeah, it's her recital.
When is that?
If I get my phone and can give you the dates for sure.
Oh.
Yeah, she's really amazing. I was so taken with her and impressed. And these are my girls, and you can see we're of multiple ancestries. All the girls in the picture are Lumbee except for Rosie, and they're from my after-school art program.
And Rosie is, what is her mission?
Rosie's here, and she's Seneca.
Seneca.
So she's a Six Nations person. And Rosie told the girls a little bit about her culture. She talked about their clan system, which I haven't gone into with the other tribes, but she said, and this is true of all Six Nation people, you go through it's matrilineal, you go through your mother's line, and she asked them, why do you think that is? And they're like, well, I don't know. And she's like, because you always know who your mother is. So, say if your dad was Mohawk and your mom was something else, that means you're not really recognized as being Mohawk. Even though everybody knows full well you're half Mohawk, it's your mother's line that counts. This is that's a traditional social dance.
You mean that?
And they're, oh sure, yeah, the traditional social dance. You see they wear the cloth dresses and the leggings, and they have their traditional headgear on the men. And I have to look at their word for it. And then one thing that the Six Nations, the headdress is called a gastoe. And one thing that the Six Nations contributed to society today is they invented lacrosse. That was their thing. So this is stickball, a long time ago, obviously. And then that became, we go to the next one.
That, like, can you go back to that one picture for this?
Sure.
So that's where they catch the ball with, like the ones on the right. That small little net.
Mm-hmm.
So it's even smaller than how the lacrosse stick is now.
Yeah.
'Cause the lacrosse stick, the net is like this big. That's crazy. That's super hard.
Well, this is stickball too, and it evolved some. People still play this. Like my tribe, even they're having a social stickball game soon. And then there's traditional lacrosse sticks too that are bigger, and they're still made out of wood and sinew. And then, so it did evolve, but they still play the traditional.
But they catch the ball with that little net.
Mm-hmm. And beat people and everything else. Yep. Nice. And this is an illustration of a ball game. And a ball team, like back in the day, you see the little sticks. And then this is the Iroquois National Lacrosse team that plays right now, and they compete. And actually, as I'm saying, they're autonomous nations. Six Nations have their own passport. They can travel outside the United States with their passport. That's other governments recognize that they're autonomous nations within a nation. And this is their travel lacrosse team, who are ridiculously good and feared in the lacrosse world. There's them some more. Deer was very important to the culture. Deer were hunted and revered as a spiritual animal. Still are. And then they're also known for the Three Sisters system of gardening. So you had corn, squash, and beans. And y'all know this? Everyone know this? No? Okay, the corn is like the bean pole, and then the beans grow up the corn, and then the squash is on the ground, so it keeps down the weeds. And it's like this ingenious gardening system that people still use. Three Sisters. And this is a Haudenosaunee feast. You got your corn, your turkey, cranberry. Basically, we're in the same region. They're a little bit further north, but imagine what you can get out of the woods and the rivers and the ocean also. Here are some Iroquois men, Haudenosaunee men in their gastoe and their breechcloth. And they, remember I said contact happened on the East Coast first, so they use a lot of cloth in their regalia. And some, you see they still have their buckskin leggings. Little girl and her relative, I'm sure. And these are some Mohawk ladies. They wear a lot of purple. I love their purple. And they're known for being iron workers. So these, like, they built the Brooklyn Bridge. They worked on all kinds of, pretty much every major bridge, like from here all the way up to Canada, they worked on it. And they're known for being fearless and really good at their job. And one of the largest Mohawk communities is actually in Brooklyn, New York City. So here they are working. Some guys on the job back in the day. Like it's nothing.
Right? Just chilling.
I have anxiety just looking at that.
Oh my gosh. And that was before Photoshop, so that junk is real.
That's real.
God.
And this is their one of their jackets. American Indian Iron Workers. They have their own societies and unions. And then here's, if you have any more questions or you need anything from me, you can get a hold of me that way, or through Miss Jamia. You can email me, call me. So thank you for having me. I hope you all didn't fall asleep too bad.
No. Thank you.